Everyone, welcome. This is episode 15 of The Hype. This is a talk show series that I've been doing now for almost a year, I guess, and this is going to be episode 15, like I said. In the past, episodes have really focused on being kind of like interviews where I've interviewed pro players or prominent community members like Sir Scoots, for instance, and just different things like that. But essentially, we have a couple of big tournaments coming up for some of the NA teams, and we just had a big tournament for the NA teams just a few weeks ago. And so what I'm trying to do is just something a little bit different here, which is basically I'm going to take Moses, who is a former professional player in CSGO, used to play for Elevate back when they were sponsored by Exertus. He's been to an ESCA LAN at the invite level, so he's competed at a pretty high level domestically. He's even gotten to play against some of the international teams when he played at Iron Gaming with his team, Exertus. So he definitely has that professional background as a player in CSGO, and he's also been serving as an analysis caster for ESCA TV for the past few months now, casting with me and other people like Sadicus, casting the invite matches, and then of course we've also been doing premier playoffs and things like that. So he's definitely kind of coming to his own as a commentator nowadays. So great to have him. Now I do want to tell you that I know there's been a long break since the last episode that I did, so a little bit of housekeeping on that was I actually had a couple of interviews lined up for episodes of The Hype earlier this month, and they all bailed on me basically, and so that's pretty much why it's been so long in between episodes. I hope in the future that I won't have giant, month and a half breaks in between episodes, but sometimes it just happens when you have people kind of commit to something and then turn around and drop out. So I kind of got forced to delay things. But without further ado, we are going to do this episode, and what we're going to do this episode is we're going to talk about CEVO LAN. We're going to talk about what can we learn from CEVO LAN. What does it tell us about NA Counter-Strike? And then after that, we'll talk about FACEIT and then ESWC and then our plans for the next episode. But with that being said, so this show is kind of an interview show, right? I am going to ask Moses just a couple of questions to introduce you to him. So Moses, maybe do you want to introduce yourself just a little bit without a question? Just go out there, just free ball it.
Yeah. I'm Moses. I'm like you said. I'm doing casting now. I was playing for Exodus and what is now Elevate for like 2.5 seasons, and before that, I was just well known from 1.6, where I played with the original United 5 lineup, and also did a bunch of analysis and article writing for ESEA before they became this gigantic, awesome company that you see today.
Right. So, I mean, you have a big history as being a 1.6 player in North America, like you said, United 5. But so you're saying that you did actually do some analysis stuff in the past, basically. So you do have experience as being kind of a writer and an analyst in your own right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I used to do like match reviews and tournament, like pre-tournament write-ups on teams, and post-tournament analysis and post-match analysis, and all that kind of good stuff. They didn't really have a big article. ESCA, this is, didn't have like a big writing staff at the time, so Craig and Kane kind of gave me free reign to just kind of write about whatever I wanted pertaining to Counter Strike, which was really cool. So I had a lot of articles written way back in the day, or like around like 2003 to 2005.
Okay. And I mean, I know you obviously play professionally CS:GO North America, like you said, you talked about with Elevate and stuff like that. But was commentary or analysis always something that you wanted to maybe take a stab at again in the future or something like that? Like, is this what you expected to wind up doing?
Uh, yes and no. I mean, obviously, I didn't really like necessarily expect it. It was just kind of a cool way to stay involved in something that I think is a lot of fun, that I've spent a lot of time doing, and that I'm very knowledgeable about. And I actually did some casting actually way back when with like TSN, like Team Sports Casting Network, way back when there weren't streams. It would just be people tuning into
Mm.
the radio station on like Winamp, and then opening their own HLTV and listening to us chat while they followed on their own. Um, so way back when it was just that, I actually did a lot of like color casting with a couple guys.
Yeah, it's actually funny. That's kind of where I got my start too. Not with TSN, but what TSN became. Like Hunter and Alex Hackney made a new company called Gamefire after TSN, and that's where I kind of came in. So it's kind of funny to have somewhat similar roots, I guess. But anyway, so the first topic on the agenda that we want to talk about is actually going to be CEVO LAN. Now, I don't know if any of you folks out there are from the subreddit or if you pay attention to it or not, but I think my Reddit post is actually one that was stickied for CEVO LAN throughout the majority of the event. And also in that thread, I had posted a lot of match analysis of the matches. Like I did predictions of who I thought would win. I did like analysis of what happened in each match and map and stuff like that. And originally I was going to turn it into some type of article where I was like, what do we learn from CEVO LAN? And I was going to bring up these different points of what maybe we can pull from it, basically. But what I did decide to do instead was just bring it out on the show and then let Moses talk about it, because we've actually had a few little heated debates just between ourselves and Mumble, like in the middle of casting ESCA matches or in between matches. We'll just start talking about NA Counter-Strike and kind of debate about particular teams and players and stuff like that. So I figured that'd be great material for the show for you folks to listen to. And so that's what we're going to start with. And so basically how I'm going to do this is I'm not going to go match by match, Moses, even though we will talk about matches, but I'm going to talk about it in different storylines that I thought that I saw, and then you can either agree or disagree, and we'll just kind of hash it out, right? So the first topic that I have, and this is because this story starts in the upper bracket of CEVO LAN, is the question. This is not a statement. I'm not saying it's true. It's a question for us to debate, which is Netcode Guides on the rise? Meaning, have they been improving over time, and do they have the potential to become one of North America's best teams and potentially at some point rise up to the status of someone like Cloud9 or iBUYPOWER? Now, the reason why I bring this up is this, and I'm going to give my side of the story, and I'm going to let Moses chip away at it. But basically, when Netcode Guides first started out, they started out as mouse spaz, right? So like the core, which is Finesse and Cutler, back when they used to play with other people like Slip and all these other different guys, they struggled even to make it to ESCA LAN. I mean, they were either having negative records or they were like 8-8. They just weren't really doing that well even in online play. But recently, not this season, but last season and the season before that, they made some different roster changes. And they actually did make it to an ESCA LAN, but when they got there, the first ESCA LAN they went to, they got straight up dominated by teams like iBUYPOWER. Teams that also were beating them online too. iBUYPOWER was wrecking them online and on LAN. I remember I did an interview with Finesse actually in one of the episodes of The Hype, and he was kind of talking about how he would rather play Complexity or whoever all day long before he played iBUYPOWER, because iBUYPOWER just had their number, and they literally were getting wrecked by iBUYPOWER in scrims online, like really lopsided scrims results. Online match results, they were getting wrecked for the most part, so they weren't doing anything against a team like iBUYPOWER. But before CEVO LAN, going into it, you got Netcode now picking up Tarek. You have JDM, who is seemingly shaping up to be a pretty decent opper. And during the online seasons of ESC and CEVO, these teams kind of traded matches against one another. So now, finally, Netcode Guides actually getting maps off of iBUYPOWER online, something they were not able to do maybe a year ago as Mouse Spaz. And when they came into this LAN event, they faced each other in the upper bracket round 1. And first map is DE Cash, a map that Netcode has beat them online on, but iBUYPOWER's beating them online on it too, so they've just traded online results, what have you. But at this event, they only lost Cash 16-13, and I truly will argue that I really do think that Netcode Guides should have won that map had it have not been for a computer crash issue. Because essentially, at one point in the second half of the match, Netcode has a 3v2 retake opportunity on iBUYPOWER, and iBUYPOWER has like some low health players, and Cutler just crashes his computer over on the A bomb site, never able to make the rotation. Meanwhile, so it becomes like kind of a 2v2, and Netcode does get one of the iBUYPOWER players down, and it would have put Cutler, like I guess, in a 1v1, but he was crashed out. He couldn't do anything. And that completely killed like momentum, money. It forced them to save the next round, all kinds of things. It was just a big chain reaction. And they still only lost by 3 rounds, so I really do think they could have won Cash. But then you go on to Dust 2, and Netcode Guides were up 7-1 at one point, had a really big lead, and then they just let it slip, though. Wound up losing the first half out 9-6, and then eventually lost the match 16-12. So my point is I think just based on recent online results and then how they just played iBUYPOWER on LAN at this event shows that they are at least making steps in the right direction. So Moses, do you see this, or do you see no, Netcode Guides is not even close to what I'm trying to make them out to be?
Uh, I don't think they're anywhere close to what you make them out to be. I think this was by far the best showing they've had at a tournament that we've seen them at, which is good. But I mean, you can say, if this didn't happen, if the computer didn't crash, I mean, they got their shot at iBUYPOWER again in the lower bracket finals, and they got beat again um, twice. So I don't have faith in that team to be the next North American team. And regardless, I mean, you want to praise them for getting to 13 rounds, and it's like I'm not going to praise them for getting a close loss. Um, like they still haven't proven they can beat anyone, and every time they've been to ESCA LAN, on top of that, they've gotten beat badly, especially by European teams have just beat up on them, and other American teams have beaten up on them. So I mean, I'm not. They haven't shown me anything. They haven't won any big matches, and they might have gotten close, but I'm not going to give them credit for getting close to uh, beating a team.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair point to make. I think the point that I was just trying to illustrate is that they've come a long way in the past year. Because a year ago they would have been losing iBUYPOWER like 16-3, 16-4, not even close to touching that team.
Okay, so they went from losing big to losing smaller.
To making yes. So
Okay,
here's my point.
sure, I'll give you that one.
I think that not only that, but they've established. Never mind, that's not even a good point. They beat Denial, but who? I mean, we'll get to Denial in a minute. But um, I guess the point I was just trying to make is like they're not getting blown out by the elite teams anymore. They're actually competing, and they're putting themselves in situations where they actually find themselves where they have a lead in the match, or they find themselves in a situation where they are close to winning, but now they just can't close it out. It's like a choke situation now. But my point is what I have seen over time from the core lineup is that they've made roster improvements along the way. So I think, for instance, bringing in JDM over Slip has been a roster improvement. I think that based on the type of play that we see out of Tarek online, and then how he did do individually at CEVO LAN, that he may arguably have been an improvement over the type of performances that Lucky was having on the roster. So my point is I think that they are making improvements and they are heading in the right direction. I don't think they're there yet. No, they're never. I mean, they're definitely not even anywhere near where they need to be to compete against European teams. No chance. But I feel like they're at least taking the necessary steps to improve themselves, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really argue with that. Yeah, I mean, Tarek turned out to be a really good pickup, and you talked a lot about JDM the other night when we got into this a little bit, and he certainly played well this event. But once again, it's just this is one event, and they didn't beat anyone that they weren't supposed to beat. So, yeah, you could say they're getting better, but we haven't seen. I mean, they haven't really been challenged, like to the point where they're overcoming anything that they. Okay, let me rephrase that. They've been losing to the same teams that they're losing to now. So all they're really doing is just continually beating teams they're supposed to beat, and whatever roster improvements, that's still not getting them to the point where they can beat better teams, where they can be considered a better team.
Right. Also, I will say, obviously, as recent as last night for their DreamHack Winter Qualifiers, they made it all the way to the finals of that event. They took a map off iBUYPOWER as the first map. I think it was Cash. It's a pretty one-sided victory for Netcode. But they wound up, after having some DDoS situations, losing Nuke, even after having a 6-1 lead on CT side. They wound up still dropping that map, and then they lost Dust 2 pretty badly, from what I understand, on map number 3, and iBUYPOWER took the qualification slot. So this is just another instance of them going against iBUYPOWER and actually having some level of success. But once again, that is an online result. But here's the problem, though. The problem with NA esports, or NA Counter-Strike, actually not esports, but just Counter-Strike in general, is that in most cases you wouldn't really want to uphold online results in your analysis, just because it's a completely different type of prestige level or status, or different level of difficulty, things of that nature. But unfortunately for us in NA, we don't really have a whole lot of LANs to go off of, other than ESCA and now this recent CEVO LAN. All we really can go off of is these online qualification matches for big tournaments or regular season match results. So I guess my point is that obviously there's some players on Netcode that have performed really well online, but haven't necessarily transferred that to the LAN setting. So I don't know if that's a factor. I mean, is it a
Oh, no, it
situation?
absolutely is. Absolutely is. And it's been that way for a couple lands now, and that's part of the reason why I don't have confidence in them being able to take that next step. Is I think there's such a large disconnect um, between how some of their players perform, like online or in the regular season versus in the playoffs and at a LAN in a tournament setting. And for whatever reason that occurs, it's always going to hold them back. If you're used to one player getting 20 frags a match online and he's only getting like 12 to 10 on LAN, like the strats that all of a sudden work when he's getting the kills, like just don't work. That's just how it is. And we see that too much in teams like Netcode, like Denial, um, just these. And that's the big thing that they've got to change. They've got to find some way their players, and it seems to just be so consistent now that I don't know what else they have to do, um, what else they need to do aside from roster changes. Maybe it's not their strats, because their strats will work if people are getting the kills that they're getting online. But
Mm-hmm.
you see too much of a disconnect between online and LAN with some of these teams.
Okay, so let's play backseat driver then, right? Let's say that we have been given the task to improve Netcode Guides and get them up to a elite level in NA. Okay, let's just say that's our goal, right? So if you give us that situation based on what I've seen from CEVO LAN and online match results and just kind of the direction that they're heading, I do feel like JDM is rising to the occasion with the op. I know that you've kind of mentioned that he's had a lot of bad lands. Let's talk about that then. So I would argue that the only real lands that he's been to where he's actually played with his team is what? One ESCA land and then CEVO LAN. So two lands, correct? I mean, he's been to some smaller events like
Probably a couple
SoCal.
more, yeah. But
I mean,
sure, you could say that.
I mean,
He's
he's
been
been
to a
to.
couple ESCAs with the Netcode guys. He's been to like two or three, I think.
Mm-mm. I think
Been to
he's
at
only
least two.
been. I think he's only been the one with them.
Okay, well, either way, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not trying to say that JDM is bad on land, because I've seen him do well, and I've seen him hit shots on land that he will hit online, and I've seen him hit very effective shots, and I've seen him dominate matches with his op on land. It's just a consistency factor, and some of it isn't even the aim. It's sometimes it's your decision making, and some of that comes into like being used to pressure. I will say JDM goes to a lot of the smaller like West Coast lands that I've seen out there,
Yeah, he
um,
does.
but and ever since I've seen him frequenting those, he plays with I think like Semphis and some other
Mm-hmm.
West Coast people, and ever since he's been doing that, he's been getting better. But you were making the point the other night that you think he's going to become this force of an opper, like this forceful sniper that's just going to dictate matches. I don't see it out of him. I think he's a good opper, and I think he's a better than average opper, but I don't see him as the kind of opper that's just going to lead his team to victories and dominate matches.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say that JDM is like a Skadoodle or a Kenny S or something like that, like some crazy elite level opper that
Well,
can
let's
carry
not
his
even
team.
put those two people into the same group, because that's a bit much.
Oh yeah, of course it is. That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to make that leap of a comparison, but I think that if you take a look at what talent is available for Netcode to use in the NA scene that's not already tied up, in a big sponsor team like Cloud9 or iBUYPOWER, I think JDM is probably one of the best options that you do have left at that point at the opping position. And so I think that Netcode Guides should really ride or die with this guy. I think that he is improving. I think that he has done well for them, and I honestly think that they should stick by their guns on this one. And remember, this is part of our mission of trying to backseat drive for Netcode and direct them towards being a good NA team. And if it were me, I would say you should ride or die with this guy as your opera at this point. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I mean, yeah, I mean, once again, it's like you, you want to say you ride or die with him because he's the best opportunity. Like you're just saying he has like um, the best of the bottom of the barrel, and that's I'm not trying to like you know uh, dish dish JDM a little bit or insult him or anything, but um, I mean, there's no one even close to him beneath him. So yeah, they keep him. But I mean, I don't think it's any reason for him being spectacular. I think he does very well at times. He just needs to find consistency.
I mean, I guess I'm struggling to see the inconsistency factor that you see, because I would agree that at ESCA LAN he wasn't very consistent, but the only teams that he played against was like Virtus Pro and Navi, and
So
that's his first big LAN. I mean, you expect him just to go out and destroy people with the op, like Guardian or something like that, like right off the bat in his first big event?
no, but I expect him to be able to perform the way he does against Cloud9 and iBUYPOWER online.
True. But whenever you look at CEVO LAN, where he did go up against those teams, he actually did pretty well. And I mean, he
And I said
consistently
that
fragged well.
was, yeah, I said that was his best event. He did well, and if he could keep that consistency up, then yeah, I'm gonna change my opinion on him as a player overall. I thought he did really well CEVO LAN, but I mean, when it comes down to it, once again, the team only beat the team they were supposed to beat. They got as close as you want to iBUYPOWER, but they still lost. So yeah, JDM, I wouldn't take JDM off that team.
Right. So the next person then would be Tarek, who has been their latest addition, who is one of the few players on their team that at least when we saw at CEVO LAN, has carried over his online stats to a LAN environment, as far as how well he was fragging and things like that. Even watching him play, he made the same types of peaks and plays that he makes online on LAN. So it's one of those situations where not only did his fragging match, but his style of play was about the same. Like, so for example, people used to talk about how Mospec online, stats were always really good, but the bigger point is that the way that he played on LAN just did not match the play style that he had online. Like, he wasn't taking the same peaks or having the same confident movements and things like that. Whereas in the matches that I saw Tarek play, it was like the way he was playing was how I expected him to play based on what I had seen before. Like, it didn't seem like he was timid or changed things up. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
I thought he played pretty well too. I had nothing against his play. I mean, he's one of those. He's just an aimer. He's a guy who's going to run around and get you some frags, and that's exactly what he did. And that was really good by him, and that was obviously a good pickup by NCG. I mean, the only two people on that team.
Okay, let's get to what the problem is then.
Yeah, I think that FNS and Hazed would be the two that you'd want to look at. I think Cutler has done really well for them in the past, and he's not a guy who's going to get you some crazy spectacular plays, but he's going to be consistent. He's always going to be getting you into those 13 to 20 frags per match, depending on how he's feeling. And if he gets hot, he gets hot. But I don't really too often see him have a bad game outside of his entire team having a bad game. So I like Cutler a lot, and I would keep him, JDM, and Tarek. And I think if you're going to make changes, which I'm not saying that they necessarily should, but two players you're going to want to look at are FNS and Hazed.
Yeah, I mean, I would 100% agree with that evaluation there, and that's kind of the two names that I've talked about as well. When it comes to Finesse, it's one of those situations where, and this happens on a bunch of different teams, right, where you have the in-game leader who isn't necessarily fragging up to par with the rest of his team, but he still adds a great element as an in-game leader, and thus he still kind of earns his keep, so to speak, on the roster. God, I hate to make this comparison. It's going to be really bad. Are you ready for this? This is going to be terrible.
Is it going to be better than your Blender one from last night?
No, this is really bad.
Okay.
Now, when I make this comparison, don't take this as me comparing Netcode Guides to the team I'm about to use as an example. I just want to make the point that the community criticism and things are similar, right? So look at Titan. Look at Existence. So how many times has this guy been criticized for not fragging well, being individually not on the same level as the rest of his team in the fragging department, but he has this genius level in-game leading ability, and so therefore people are still like, yeah, Xensis is a genius, his strat calling is excellent, his strat calling is a major reason why his team does so well, and so he basically, I won't say he gets a free pass for not fragging well, but the point is that people still see the value that Existence adds to that team, even if he's not fragging crazy like the rest of his teammates are, right? Now, because of this, certain people like Lurpus have said, okay, great, there's a way you can implement that genius level intellect without necessarily having to have him in the server fragging, which is as a coach, and then you bring in another fragger, and you still get that genius level calling intellect, but then you get a better fragger. So that's the situation that existence is in the community's eyes, right? But when I look at Netcode Guides with Finesse, he also is in the situation where he doesn't really frag really heavy for his team. He's usually below the rest of the guys on there, and that's online and on LAN. So basically, I don't know, consistently mediocre. I don't know. Like, it's not like he's dropping bombs online and then doing bad on LAN. He's pretty much has the same like average damage per round stats and stuff like that between his online and on LAN play. But my point is with existence, he does add this genius level in-game leading to your team. But does Finesse really add that to Netcode Guides? I mean, I don't know. I'm not there. But, I mean, I've seen some
No.
pretty weird shot calling from that team.
Yeah, that's not even a question to debate.
So, in that case, what value do you add to the team that would want them to keep you around whenever they're trying to be a contender?
I mean, listen. Any organization that a team leader brings, even if it's not this genius level strat calling, any type of organization or structure you can implement in a team and you have in that mid round scenarios and situations is better than nothing. So if they can't find someone, or if no one wants to make that transition into a leader, then I mean he's the best they're going to do. You know, we don't have coaches here in North America quite yet, and something's better than nothing, even if it's not that great necessarily. But he provides that structure, and if they don't have someone on that team, you're just going to see him perform even worse. So, I mean, he's just someone you have to find someone to either pick up to be a leader or transition someone current to transition into that leadership role. And if no one's going to step up and do it, then he's got to stay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the case. I mean, I guess I'm just curious. Like, if you were to look at that team on paper, you would make that same argument, like, oh, this guy's not really fragging well, they should maybe consider getting someone who is more up to par with the rest of their fraggers. And in some cases, you might make an exception to that rule, though, if that person was very valuable to the team in a leadership aspect, or a shot calling aspect or something like that. But my point is I'm just not sure if Finesse is that or not. I don't know. Like, I don't know what leadership he brings to the table. I'm not in their mumble. I don't know how he keeps their morale up. I don't know how he makes good calls or strats or whatever. I have no idea, what value he adds. But the point I'm trying to make, and the point that you've already made, so I'm just agreeing with you basically, is that is a name you might want to look at changing if you find yourself plateaued. Like, as long as you keep getting better and you keep doing better, then yeah, maybe you should just stick with the roster, ride or die. If you enjoy playing together, then yeah, I think one issue people always have is roster instability. So maybe it is worth keeping your roster stable and not making changes and just grinding it out and getting better together. But if you do at some point find yourself plateaued and you don't see yourself ever getting any better, then that's whenever you might have to make a consideration, right?
Right. Correct.
So is it the same thing with Hayes? I mean, obviously he's not the in-game leader. He's one of their fraggers. So would you make that same argument about him, or would you make a different argument in that regard?
As to Hayes, I mean, I'm just going to say with Hayes, I just don't. I just think he's kind of the odd man out, to be honest with you. I don't think he brings anything that crazy to the team. I mean, I think he's a pretty decent player. He's a pretty good mid-level invite player, and if they're looking to improve, that's somewhere. Like I said with Color, he doesn't do anything like super crazy, but like he's always going to get you those 13 to 20 frags, and I think that Hayes is the same kind of player. He doesn't do anything crazy. He's got good aim, but like he has those bad games, and I just don't think I think he's just that player, that second player that you want to look at.
Right, so people are coming in chat that like Hayes is like their second best fragger, so why would you get rid of him? Or their best fragger, why would you get rid of him? But the bottom line is that Hayes is one of the cases on this team that does wind up being their heavy fragger online in the regular season matches that they play against. So, I mean, if you look at their stats from this last season in the regular season, Hayes was right below JDM and Tarek, right where you would kind of expect him to be based on the roster composition. If you look at their team last season, though, he was their best fragger. He had the highest ADR on the team. He had the most frags on the team for the most part. But then whenever he went to the postseason, he was not quite near where he was online. So the point is that yeah, you would statistically say he is one of their best fraggers, but when it comes to the big competition, the competition that really matters, he hasn't been delivering that level of play consistently.
And I will say this: he actually played a lot better at CEVO LAN than I thought he would, than I was accustomed to seeing him play at, say,
Mm-hmm.
like ESCA LANs. But the big issue is, we've said that about like two or three other players right already, and if that's players like surprising and playing above what we're expecting and playing very very well, and they still didn't even take a map. Like it wasn't even that they didn't win the best of three; they didn't take a map off iBUYPOWER, and I mean that's not good. It's not good at all. But I mean, it's nothing against these players. I think they're all good players, but like, they've had seasons together now, and they're not producing. So, I mean, it's just kind of we gotta wait and see till the next tournament and see how they do, and maybe try and prove us wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my conclusion on Netcode Guides before we move on, because we've been on this topic for a while, is I think that at this point I wouldn't make any changes because I am seeing improvements based on the fact that their land results have been getting better, in the sense that they're at least competing for maps and not getting blown out when it comes to the land environment. Players such as JDM and Tarek seem to be transitioning their online abilities to the land environment. So I think that they're moving in the right direction ever since they, got sponsored by Netcode. They, got rid of Slip and things like that. They seem to have been, they're progressing, and I don't think they've quite plateaued yet. So I think if I were them, I would probably leave it for now, and which of course they're forced to. Well, I guess they're not forced to. They're not going to ESCA LAN, and they haven't qualified for any other big LAN events yet. So really all they have to look forward to is regular season next season of ESCA and season 6 of CEVO at this point. Maybe some off-season tournaments. I know FACEIT's doing one, that John Wick tournament or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I guess at this point, here's the other problem. Let's say they do want to make a change because they are noticing that they have plateaued. Who can you get that would be an improvement?
It's always the question, isn't it?
And
I
I
mean,
just don't. I
there's a
don't
lot of
see
good
one.
players. They'd have to poach them from another team, but there's always good players out there.
Oh yeah, I just don't see them being able to poach a player from like a Cloud9 or an iBUYPOWER for
Oh hell
one,
no.
and then for two, I mean the only other players that I think would be an improvement than what they have is maybe poaching somebody from Elevate or something like that, which I don't
I
think is
doubt
going to
that would
happen either.
happen. Yeah.
So I just don't think they really have anything, unless you try to take a gamble on somebody like in Premier or Main who's doing really really well, and you want to see if you can bring him up, which I mean has happened for a couple of players, and it worked out pretty well for those guys and those teams. But I don't know if that's the position that Netcode finds themselves in. They did it with JDM actually. They pulled JDM from a main team a long time ago to make them
Hmm.
his opera, and it worked out.
Yep.
Obviously, Shroud has worked out for Cloud9, coming from the amateur leagues and then being a superstar pretty much now. Um, I guess you could say it's worked for Tarek too, because Tarek was kind of a gamble for them as well. He wasn't playing Invite before they picked him up. So maybe they make another crazy move like that and take a risk and see if it works out again. I don't really know. I guess for me right now they are improving, so I would leave it and then just kind of see how they do this next couple of seasons of online play. That's where I'm at.
Okay.
Is
Yeah, it's
that
not a bad stance. No, I mean, yeah, leave it. Why not?
cool? So the next question is another storyline, and this ties directly to what we've been talking about, is what NA players should we be keeping an eye on outside of iBUYPOWER and Cloud9 that we think could rise up to be stars, at least within North American Counter-Strike. I don't know about international competitors, but at least elite level NA players. Because right now, you made the comment last night, and I'm going to bring it up because it's tied to this question directly, is do you think there's 13 good players in North America? And
I mean, I just threw out a number during
yeah,
that conversation.
so and what you entailed was is that basically what that means is that you take the starting five of iBUYPOWER and Cloud9. Those are your 10 really good players, and then there's 3 more really good players, and those guys are like Adren, Anger, and Volcano. And then outside of that,
I wouldn't hold a Dren up in that same standard. To be honest with you,
okay,
I think towards the end of him playing in iBUYPOWER, we saw him really, really struggle in a lot of matches, and I think that's part of the reason why he stepped down. He was realizing he didn't really have that magic to compete at that top professional quote unquote level, and I think that's kind of why you saw him step down. I think Volcano, if he if a team wanted to give him another chance and he played and he practiced, which is what Volcano does when he's on a team, is he would get back up there. And I think Anger obviously could get back up there. It's just for some reason the two top teams both chose to part with him after having really good performances at ESCN. iBUYPOWER winning it the first time around, and
Mhm.
then Cloud9 getting second. So for whatever reason, maybe I don't know
I
if
think
it's a
it has to be a
personality clash, but
personality clash at that point. I don't know either. I think that the reason why it happened with Cole is because Cole already had the mindset that they weren't going to keep him after ESCA Land. It
yeah,
was a temporary fix, and they really wanted to go a different direction even before they picked him up in the first place.
yeah, that's
Um,
possible.
so I almost think that that has to be part of it. Um, so my point is then is, are there any other good players in outside all these names that we've named? And I think that there is. And I would say that Desi would be one, even though he doesn't pertain to CEVO LAN at all, but I think he did pretty well. I think he got kind of overshadowed in his performance at ESA LAN because Shroud was on his team and Shroud was doing well. And obviously Shroud got picked up by what is now Cloud9, and Desi has kind of remained in the mid-tier of Invite, so to speak. So I think Desi's a name that comes up that could be a rising star in NA to keep an eye out for. But if we're just focused on CEVO LAN, I mean, some of the names that we've already mentioned, I think, are names that could continue to grow, like a Tarek, like a JDM. Um, is there any other names that come to mind out of CEVO LAN or in general that you think we should keep an eye out for when it comes to the top of NA?
I mean, I think that if yeah, I think XP3 is a pretty underrated player, and I say this partially. I was his teammate for a long time. I got to see a lot of the things he did, um, and I think he can be a very good player on the right team and with his team. So we'll see how he does this upcoming ESA LAN. I think another Elevate player they picked up was Rush, who has been just a beast. He's kind of like never quite got that hype that Shroud got when he was playing really well in Invite, but he is just like a heavy fragger. Who's done well on his teams, and he's only been to I think one ESCA land, so we'll see how he does. But he's someone you'd want to keep your eye on, absolutely. And then I know there's some premier players that I'm actually missing out on right now. Let me see if I can jolt my memory on the team list. I don't know if you have any of your own.
I mean, from Premier, I mean, Justice Pro's been doing really well, actually. And so maybe some of those guys you might be able to look at. They've been doing a lot better than I thought they would be able to do. I know it's online only results, but and they did pretty bad at Fragdelphia, to be honest, when they're playing against Pugs and still only find third place or whatever. Um,
Yeah,
but I mean, they've played better. They've gotten better online results than I expected from them based on who they were up against and stuff like that. So I guess you could say those people. I mean, we already talked about the stream team. Those names on that team are pretty obvious names to look out for if they ever do creep their way back into Invite. And then outside of that, I mean, I guess you could look at some of the names that are on Pure or Savage. So names like Dumore or things like that, or maybe other names that we can
you
kind
know
of
I
look out
will
for.
just to say this, I will because Denial picked up Nitro.
Nitro.
And if you had asked me this question a week ago, he wouldn't have been on my list. So that pickup actually really surprised me that they did that.
I don't think it's
Uh,
surprised. We'll talk about Denial actually next if you want to.
I mean, this leads right into it. Let's
It
just do
does
it.
that. Yeah, boom. So Denial, right? Simphis was quoted as saying the most online team in North America on his stream. I can't wait to play them on LAN, and he did get to.
And
And
he gave him a beating.
he
He gave
gave
them.
them the big DP right there. Uh, it was bad. It wasn't pretty. There's nothing pretty about it. Look at
It's
Denial.
16-7 and 16-3.
Yeah, it was not good. Uh, Literally, the only thing that Denial was able to accomplish at CEVO LAN was beat iBUYPOWER in the GXL event after the CEVO LAN was over.
And
Which
I will say
I
that
wouldn't hold
nobody
almost
cares
no
about.
weight to that accomplishment.
Yes. Okay. Good.
Good
Um,
boy. Yeah,
yeah.
so they literally just got smashed by Cloud9, and then they got smashed by Netcode, and then it was over. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Out of there.
hmm
And I obviously Juvenile was maybe a weak point on that team, and so that decision to make a roster change there was probably
You know,
reasonable.
okay, that smells like a scapegoat though to me,
Yeah, that's very
because
true.
I don't think Juvenile played much different than he has played from online. Like
Nope.
maybe he had some matches where he got some small frags, but
Hmm.
he's never really like a top fragger for them
Yep.
online
That's
either.
very true.
So
He played
it
about the
was,
same.
and it just kind of felt like they were just reaching for something. Um,
Let's be
so I
honest
mean,
here.
it is what it
Shazam,
is.
let's be honest here. Shazam was not as impactful a fragger with the op as he has been online. Uh, I mean, some of the duels that he wins online on a pretty consistent basis, he barely ever won during the actual CEVO LAN event. That's not to say that Shazam's online or that Shazam cheats or that Shazam's bad, but the bottom line is however you want to shake it, he wasn't the impact fragger at that event that he has been in literally almost all of the online matches that we've watched out of that team over the past few months.
Right.
And
Yep.
so that crippled that team a lot because they rely on Shazam's op so much. They rely on Shazam's op to get them plays almost as much as Netcode relied on JDM before they picked up Tarek to be able to get them in rounds. And almost to the point that they will sacrifice their economy very, very much just to get a sniper in that dude's hands.
Yeah,
And
and
that's a big investment.
here's the second issue with them just as a team. It's the same issue that I see iBUYPOWER have a lot. Um, and it's that Shazam, they use him so much online to open rounds up, and they use him to entry frag in certain situations, and they get him an op, and like especially on Dust 2, you'll see them all just sit around looking for pushes and let like Shazam and one other person work an area, and like when you rely that much on an opper, like you can't. It just doesn't work on LAN as much, and you see that with iBUYPOWER. If Skadoodle's not having a hot game, they really struggle at times to have opening picks, and you saw that occur with Denial on at CEVO, and the difference is like teams like Titan who have like Kenny S and Navi who have Guardian, they work their opper in a team like in a team goal. He's not the one who's always just going to be opening him up. He's just kind of there. Um, Sometimes he works a spot to open a round up for him, but at other times he's just there to support, and they switch it up. But when you have an opera like Shazam and even Skadoodle, sometimes you put so much on their shoulders, and if they're not hot on LAN, then they're going to struggle, and that's exactly what we saw.
Right. And so the other names you could bring up are Naf and Fugly, who are kind of the stars for that team online as well.
Yeah,
Usually
they,
they're
they each
top
had some good
fraggers.
matches. They each
Yeah.
had some good matches
Fugly
there.
had a really good map against Cloud9 on Dust 2. He was their top fragger, and he was really the driving force behind a lot of the rounds that they did actually pick up in that map. But then you turn around to Inferno, and he did really poorly. Uh, but when you look at Naf, I think he just did mediocre the whole event. Like I don't think he had like he was basically middle of his team almost every map as far as his fragging ability or whatever. Um, so, like I said, I think that with Fugly and Naf, those are if you're Denial, you definitely don't get rid of those guys just because this was their first LAN, period. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they've been a team long enough to even
know what they are.
consider
Yeah.
getting rid of people.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, just that they had a bad LAN and they played bad and it showed. And I think a lot of that was um, how they like to play as a team just isn't really effective at tournaments, and especially against better teams who know how to counter things like that, and teams like Cloud9 and iBUYPOWER. And then on top of that, I just think they just scapegoated Juvenile a little bit. Like not saying that um, he necessarily. I mean, if they were going to replace someone, it was going to be him. It just felt with how quick it was that it was very, with all these things coming up with these qualifiers and everything, it just felt very scapegoatish to me.
Yeah, it's either there or they just have to have some type of supreme confidence that Nitro is going to just be absolutely nuts for them and really just add a whole new element to the team that will make them better on LAN. Maybe he does. I don't know. I mean, I don't. I think. I mean, I haven't really seen Nitro play a whole lot, to be quite honest with you, or at least it's been a long time since I've seen him play because we've been out of the regular season for a while now, and I haven't seen him compete because he was with Area 51. They haven't really competed in anything. Like they haven't been in the FACEIT. They haven't been in like the DreamHack Winter qualifiers. They weren't at CEVO LAN or in the CEVO playoffs really unless they were in it really early. No, they didn't even make it to CEVO playoffs at all. I don't think.
Right.
So the point is, I haven't seen him play a whole lot, but I remember watching a match where he like filled in for iBUYPOWER because like AZK or somebody was
Yep.
having net issues and like he filled in for them. And I think it was when they were playing Denial for the FACEIT slot for Milan, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember that's like the last memory I have of him. And he played pretty well in that and helped him out a lot. So I mean, he could be one of those names that we didn't mention. Well, you actually did mention his name. That could be another person to look out for. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he will help the Nile out. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, I played against him a bunch, and he's an Air 51. I've had a couple practices and in 10 mans and everything, and uh, he can do some good stuff. Like he's got good aim. He can play within a uh, team environment, and I mean, we'll just have to see if it works for him. But I would never come out and say that that's a bad pickup. It just we're just gonna have to see how they incorporate him into the team.
Yeah. So I think that, like you said, the Nile hasn't really been a team long enough to really know what they are yet and really know what they need to do to improve, to be honest. All they know is that they did really well online. Everything seemed to be working out. Then they went to LAN and kind of crashed out. And at that point, it's either because some of your players just straight up didn't perform the way that they should have been performing based on how they were performing for you at the online event. Like you said, Shazam, pretty trusty with his op, and most of the stuff they played in recently wasn't quite hitting his mark at all at CEVO LAN, and they rely on his op a lot. And so I think that did handicap them a bit. Now, does that to say they should cut Shazam and Shazam's bad? No. But I think that Shazam definitely needs to step it up in these next events that his team's going to attend and needs to prove his worth and needs to be what he has been for them online. And that is, the opera that wins them rounds. So we'll just have to see if he can rise to that occasion or not in future events. And if he can't, on a consistent basis, if he keeps flopping, then yeah, at some point you do, if you want to be a better team on LAN, have to make that decision maybe. But now it's too early, I think.
Yes, definitely, absolutely.
So let's get on to the other two teams, and this is going to transition us for the rest of the episode because we're going to be talking about iBUYPOWER and Cloud9 a lot because those are the teams that are going to FACEIT, and they are going to ESWC, and now we know for sure both of them are going to DreamHack Winter, though we won't talk about DreamHack Winter in this episode. And that is, I have three storylines that revolve around these two teams that I got from CEVO LAN.
Okay.
And just in general, Cologne, what have you, ESCA LAN, basically everything they've played in recently. That is, first story, Shroud is the real deal, man. He has, the stuff that he has accomplished and the amount of time that he's accomplished, to me, is pretty mind-blowing. Because, I mean, this guy, last year, besides his streaming, we wouldn't have even been talking about him on a show about professional CSGO. We would have said, hey, you know how we mentioned some little names like Justice Pro and stuff, like, oh, these are guys you might want to look out for in the future. We might have put him on one of those lists, but we certainly never would have probably put him on a list where, like, this guy's an elite level, NA Counter-Strike player. And, I mean, at ESCA LAN when he was playing with Jumas, I mean, he didn't do bad, but he didn't do amazing. It was kind of a neutral event for him, in my opinion. But with that said, Complexity apparently still saw potential in him, and they picked him up and rode with him. And he has done nothing but deliver for that team ever since he, took the reins over there. I mean, he did well at Cologne. He did really well at CEVO LAN. I mean, and that's not just to say that I'm, like, giving a bunch of weight to some of these clutch plays. Obviously, everyone remembers the clutch play with the CZ boosted on a cash that got them into overtime in the grand finals. I'm not even talking about just those little simple individual plays that he's done, but literally on a pretty consistent basis. I mean, at Cologne, he had one bad map the entire event, and that was Mirage against Dignitas. And every other map that he played, he did well. At CEVO LAN, I don't recall him having a poor moment at all in that entire event. I mean, I think this guy is the real deal. I think he is rising up to be one of NA's best, and I think that soon enough we're going to be having a conversation about who the best player in NA is, and his name's going to come up more often than not.
Okay. I mean, I'm going to agree that he is the real deal, but I mean, to give him the airs of coming up to be one of the best players in North America, I think is a little early. You said you wanted to find a bad map that he had. It's that first or the first grand finals that Cloud9 lost 0-2. He went 9-19 against iBUYPOWER on Dust 2. I mean, there's a bad map, but I mean, I'm not going to criticize him at all. I mean, he is very good, and he's obviously doing what Cloud9 brought him in to do, and he is excellent. And I think on top of that, he's really humble. He's a really good guy, and I see all good things and hear all good things about how he prepares for events and how he practices. So that was an awesome pickup by Cloud9. And he's going to continue to get better. And yeah, I just think it's a little early to be hoisting him up there as one of the best in North America.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with most of what you said, but I would say even at this point right now, I think you could consider him to be probably a top 5 player in NA.
Top five?
Yeah, for sure.
No, I don't think top five.
Okay. I'm not saying he's guaranteed top 5. I say he could at least be in the picture or be in the argument.
Okay.
Um, and I think that I don't know, man. I think he is top. We'll have to. I mean, let's just. I mean, he's basically every test that he has been given so far, he has passed with flying colors. It's just the
Yeah.
fact
Yeah.
that he hasn't been given enough tests yet to have the ability to have this big resume that he can point to where he's like, yeah, I have all these accomplishments. I'm obvious. Not that he would ever do that anyway, but my point is that the only problem that Shroud has faced is he hasn't gotten enough opportunities yet to get his name out there. He's only been to 2 really big events. Only one of them was really international, which was Cologne. And so I mean, he just hasn't had enough events thrown his way yet to prove himself. But I think that, I mean, he has FACEIT coming up. He has ESWC coming up. He has DreamHack Winter coming up. He has ESC LAN coming up. So in the next 2 months, he has 4 big events that are international that he will be able to attempt to prove himself more at. And if at the end of those 4 events, so if we come back here in January and this guy is putting up the numbers that he's been putting up at CEVO LAN and Cologne, at that point, 100% guaranteed top 5 in my eyes in NA.
Okay.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna disagree, but I accept the argument. I mean, it's just kind of a matter of opinion there, but I mean, you make a good point, and yeah, you're right. I mean, he is a good player, and he could be considered in that top five pretty soon.
So the next name I want to talk about from Cloud9, I think sgares is back as a fragger, man. I don't know. That's where I'm at. We even talked about the step up that he took at Cologne in comparison to some of the events prior to that where he wasn't necessarily fragging as well. He was fragging pretty well at Cologne. And when you look at, Cloud9 at CEVO LAN, we kind of discussed, like, for Cloud9 to do well and maybe beat iBUYPOWER, he would have to basically play at that same level fragging-wise that we saw at Cologne. And unfortunately, the stats are broken for a lot of Cloud9's matches because of some
Yep.
issues that they had with servers and stuff like that at the LAN. So pretty much the only thing I really have to go off of is the grand final against iBUYPOWER. And I mean, while he wasn't necessarily top fragging for his team, the fragging that he was doing at this event was substantially better than some of the fragging we've seen from him in the past. So I would be willing to argue that I think that, because the biggest criticism that sgares used to get back in the complexity days where he was still in-game leader is everyone accepted the fact that he was a really good in-game leader, and he really is. Even if he's not their in-game leader right now officially, he still obviously adds his knowledge to that team when they are making shot calls. But people were saying, oh, his op isn't really that great. They need a better opper. Or, oh, he's not fragging. It was that whole, like, existence thing all over again, basically, where the guy's, like, a really good caller but not fragging well or whatever. But ever since he gave up the in-game lead role, ever since he jacked up his mouse stands and started rifling more than opping, he's been fragging a heck of a lot better. He's improved a lot. I think he's definitely a name in the picture now.
Yeah, and I like Sean as a player a lot, and I'm glad to see him fragging the way he's been these past few events. One of the things about Sean, I think, is every sport has those like intangibles that the stat lines just can't capture, and I think Sean has a lot of those just because he's someone that you call him like a quote student of the game. He's a guy who watches a lot of demos. He's the one who prepares that team, whether he's the in-game color or not. He's the one. Watching demos and gathering the information and passing it on to his teammates. And that is such an I wouldn't say underrated, but it's not. I feel like a lot of top players in North America don't do it enough. I feel like the art of studying at teams and studying demos to improve individually is just kind of a lost art. And for Sean as a player to do that, I like it a lot. And I think he's a big reason why they have success at Cologne and maybe in these next few events. But yeah, you're right. He's fragging so well lately, and that's that bodes really well for Cloud9.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, now when you look at Cloud9, it's kind of hard to find a weak point. I mean, everyone on that team can step up and frag really, really well. You have good end game leading between Tifus and Sean, I'm sure. Um, I guess the only thing you could say is, which I wouldn't, because I think Tifus's op has actually been fine for them, but when it comes to competing internationally against other really great operas like a Kenny S or a Guardian or something like that, I don't know if it'll stack up then, but I mean, I don't really see. I think Cloud9's in a really good position. I don't think I really see a weak point. I mean, obviously, you can always work to improve your game, like strategy wise and things like that. But the point is like, I think that the current lineup they have can go on to do great things as they improve as a team together.
Yeah, they can. They've just got to find a way um, to get over the hump, so to speak, because I mentioned this to you last night that they're a team who always seems to. You look at the big games they've won. The ESC LAN where they ran through like NIP and Navi, um, and things like that. They always have a player, and Dignitas at Cologne. You always have a player just make hero plays to win them these matches where. And when they don't get those hero plays, you really see them struggle. So Hiko against Navi has that sick hold on Catwalk, and Hiko against Nip wins that 1 versus 3 on Dust 2 in the A bomb site, and then there's just like, and then Hiko has that. I mean, it always seems to be Hiko, but there's other players like Semphis winning a 1-on-3 against Titan to close out overtime, and it's just you look at the collapses that Titan and Dignitas had against them, and like the miscommunications, losing a 2-on-4 retake, and Dignitas somehow losing that same thing. It was like a 2-on-4 retake at the bomb site A and Mirage, and those are things that don't happen often in professional play.
They seem to
And
happen often for Cloud9, though, man. Like, I don't know.
I know, but they're not going to win
Oh yeah,
a
I get your point.
major doing that. You're going to win some matches, but you can't keep relying on these hero plays. Like you just can't, and they don't seem to win enough when they don't get those hero plays.
No, I mean I can definitely agree with you there. But that's also like you're right in the sense that there you can't always count on it, right? But the fact that I mean, I guess it's been mostly Hiko, but we've seen Shroud make hero plays, we've seen Symphosis make hero plays for them. Uh, the fact that they do have guys that can do that for them is obviously very beneficial. But you're right in the sense that you can't rely on that winning you events in the long run. The only point I was trying to make was is I think that they this group is probably the highest potential group that we've had in a long time out of NA to make a good placing internationally. And they've already done it, but I think that if NA ever hopes to get like a top 3 finish or something like that out of a big international event, this is a team that's going to do it if one is ever going to.
Well, I mean, I don't know if that's fair to say because you look at iBUYPOWER and you want to talk about potential. You see them winning 2 ESCA lands against top European teams, and so you want to talk about potential. Whatever they do when they go to Europe is obviously broken because they forget how to play Counter Strike when they get there. But you want to talk about potential. That team you could argue they have just as much potential as Cloud9, and they have the results on home turf to back it up. They just need to figure out what they're doing overseas.
Well, yeah, of
So
course, iBUYPOWER has established like domestic dominance. They beat Cloud9 head to head almost every time they play. And ESCA LAN or CEVO LAN online match results are mixed. Honestly, I really don't hold a lot of weight to their ESCA LAN wins though because at the last ESCA LAN, the only European team they played against was Virtus Pro. They didn't play against Navi. They didn't play against NIP. They didn't face all these other teams. I mean, so it's almost like I don't really know where they're at. The only basis I can judge their international play off of is overseas because that's the only time they play against multiple European teams at a time. And every single time they do, with the exception of Gfinity in group play, they haven't been able to beat elite European teams.
yeah,
Whereas Cloud9 has been able to do that.
okay.
So that's why I kind of have to give the nod to Cloud9. iBUYPOWER
Yeah,
does
no,
have potential.
I will 100% 10 out of 10 time you put Cloud9 and iBUYPOWER overseas, and I'm going to pick Cloud9 every time. But I just don't think that because of their um, lack of success overseas, you can completely count them out. I think at some point these players who play so well domestically on LAN are going to get it figured out. And I'm not saying it's going to be this time. I'm not like I just feel like at some point they've got to snap out of this funk and get out of group play.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. Well, I don't know what DreamHack winner groups are, so I can't make a prediction on that yet. But based on the groups that they find themselves in at FACEIT and ESWC, it's not going to be easy. But we'll get there in a second. So when you look at iBUYPOWER, talk about the potential on that team. You're talking about their players, stuff like that. Obviously, Skadoodle continues to impress on that team. I mean, I remember there was a time like way back when he was still playing with like Whole Mouse One and Curse, where he wasn't necessarily able to like transition the op that he was so dominant with online to his LAN play. But I think that over the past few events that he's been to, like Gfinity, like CEVO LAN, he really has stepped up with that op and has looked really sharp. I still think that his rifle is nuts on LAN in comparison to his op, but his op is still really damn good. So he's just all around been a good player. He's continuing to impress us. Swag is swag. You expect him to do really, really well. He's a clutch player, a good lurker. I mean, he was solid for complexity. He's been pretty solid for iBUYPOWER in general, and so I think you expect that. But I think the one name that gets overlooked, and you said this yourself, and I agree with you 100%, is people overlook AZK way too much. I didn't hear his name mentioned like once whenever like they were dominating complexity, or it's not complexity, Cloud9 on Cash or something like that. And everyone's like, "Oh man, Skadoodle's hitting every shot. Skadoodle. It's just this 24/7 Skadoodle show." AZK's name wasn't mentioned a single time, and he was top fragging for that team. So it's like he just gets overlooked, I think, way too much because people are focusing in too much on people like Skadoodle or Swag.
Yeah, sounds but that's pretty standard for AZK. I mean, that's been going on for a couple of years now, and I think he has. I think people are starting to come around and notice him more in the community. But he's a player who is very well respected in the invite community throughout all the players. Um, I think, yeah, you talk to invite players, and they'll consistently say that AZK is such a strong player, really strong player. I mean, he's got such an amazing mix of aim and smarts, and I just don't think he gets picked up because I think he's like one of those players. He doesn't do anything that's just gonna like, or he does once in a while, but like he doesn't blow your mind away at all the times. He's that player who's going to pick up a frag and stay alive and outmaneuver and then pick up another frag or two, and all of a sudden he's got 3 to 4 frags in the round, but no one really notices it because it's not these explosive 3 headshots.
Right. I think you're exactly right. I think that he's just such a smart player. He's not greedy. And like you said, I mean, you might not see him get some crazy 4K spray down or something like that. I mean, he does get those sometimes. But like I said, I think his kills are maybe sometimes spread out or go unnoticed because he's fragging at the same time someone else on his team is or whatever. And yeah, I mean, that dude's nuts. And he's probably I wouldn't say he's their best player, but I think that he ranks up there at least their second best player, to be honest.
Yeah, I can go with that. Um, at least when, I mean, obviously I'm going to put Swag up as number one, but I mean, you talk about Skadoodle's, he has those matches where he's feeling hot and he's just dominating, and then these matches where he's kind of just middle of the pack. So, I mean, him and AZK I think could go. You could flip flop them at 2 and 3,
Yeah,
but
that's
when
true.
Skadoodle's hot, I mean, things
Yeah.
like that. But you could say that about a lot of players, but I just think AZK is just obviously very underrated.
Yeah, I don't know if people underrate him. I know people know he's good. I just think that he gets overlooked. I guess underrated, overlooked. They're pretty similar in definition, but I don't think people like rate him lowly or rate him lower than he is. I just think people don't notice him because they're too busy focused on these other guys. Um, I
Yeah,
like I think most people would look at iBUYPOWER and say like Skadoodle's got to be their superstar for them to be successful. And I mean, I agree. Having a dominant op in this game has proven to help teams outload. Just look at how well Kenny S helps Titan win games. But I think AZK could be their superstar in reality when it comes to big international events if he can, rise to the occasion. So look out for that guy. Is my point. Now, the last thing I want to talk about for CEVO LAN, we've been talking about CEVO LAN for like an hour. You're welcome, Cotton. But anyway, the last thing I wanted to talk about before we go into FACEIT is head-to-head. Most people would say that iBUYPOWER is the better team head-to-head. Like, they dominate. I mean, you look at ESC LAN, they beat Complexity in 2 different sets, like 2-0 or whatever. I will argue that this is highly exaggerated. And if you look at CEVO LAN more closely, you will see that these guys are almost dead even when it comes to head-to-head matchups. That's my argument. What do you think?
I mean, I'm not going to argue against the results. I think iBUYPOWER is the better team head to head. I think when iBUYPOWER beats Cloud9, though, what's weird about it is I normally get the impression, and this isn't to take anything away from iBUYPOWER, but just like a gut feeling that I get when I watch these head-to-head matchups and iBUYPOWER wins is that Cloud9 players are just playing poorly. I don't so often get the impression that iBUYPOWER is just like flat out dominating or doing something that's just entirely countering the way Cloud9 wants to play. I just something in my gut just tells me that Cloud9 is just their players are just playing off, and that might not be fair to iBUYPOWER to say that, but I'm definitely gonna always in a head-to-head matchup always take iBUYPOWER over Cloud9. I don't see how you can do any otherwise.
Well, I mean, like, if you look at CEVO LAN as a whole, iBUYPOWER won 4 maps and Cloud9 won 3 in the 7 maps that they played against each other on. So, I mean, with that said, that's pretty neck and neck to me. And if you look at the maps that they lost in the second set to lose the event, I mean, one of them was a crazy overtime match on Cash that went to like double overtime or triple overtime or something like that. And I mean, the other match was like 16-14 or something. So my point is like, there's only a 1 map differential between the teams at that event, and the ones that Complexity, or I keep saying, the ones that Cloud9 lost were super close margin. So, I mean, I guess I can understand your point where you would take iBUYPOWER head to head every single time, like in a bet or something like that. But I mean, God, the way that Cloud9 played against them in the upper bracket final before the grand final, I mean, they just looked absolutely nutty, and it almost gets me to the point where, based on watching the upper bracket final and comparing it to what happened in the grand final, I honestly think that iBUYPOWER's results rely almost way too heavily on their momentum and their emotions. Because it seemed like every time they would win a pistol and get ecoed by C9, like second round or third round or something like that, they pretty much lost the match because they would go on like a 4-round losing streak or something in that half after they got ecoed, and they would just go on tilt and just not be able to get anything done. And that happened on a couple of different occasions in the upper bracket final. But then when you look at the grand final, and they're just like wrecking, like they'd never really find themselves in a situation where they're behind. Like, pretty much when you look at the grand final, there was almost never a point where they had to play from behind, except for one of the Dust 2s that they played in the second set of the grand finals. Every other time, they were never behind. So they never had to play in adversity or whatever. You know what I mean? And that's where I feel like they struggle. They struggle making comebacks. But if they're able to get the ball rolling, they don't have to play from behind, then they do really, really well. But they seem to have to play well from behind. I don't know. That's my point I would make.
Yeah, I mean, playing behind is never easy, but I mean, you're right, and you see it, and I even think I tweeted out to one of the European casters a couple majors ago that iBUYPOWER is a scary team if they start getting rolling, but that's pretty true with every team. There's something about Counter-Strike where your confidence and your emotional state in the middle of a match really influences how you play. And if you don't believe me, just imagine those times when you have something crazy, like you ever see someone get like four insane frags on a pistol round and then just have the half of their lives. It happens pretty often, and you see some people start to, there are those people who just can't bounce back, who have a couple tough rounds early on and just never seem to get into the swing of the game.
Right.
Yeah,
Sweet.
I would agree. iBUYPOWER is pretty momentum based, and they have a tough emotional state.
Yeah, that's their biggest hurdle, is that emotional state, because Steele will say all day long in his stream that he never rages during a tournament, that he never rages during official matches, and that all his raging is only like an act or part of his stream, and it's not like how he actually is in officials with his full team and stuff like that. But I call BS on that, because I've personally sat behind that team at ESCA lands, and I've seen Steele just turn around and just rattle on Skadoodle or somebody like that, or just like get super frustrated and super heated. And some players will handle that okay, like, you yell at them, okay, yeah, you're right, I screwed up, okay, next round, let's go. I'm not gonna, that's not gonna weigh on my mind at all. I'm just gonna keep going through, not a big deal, I'm gonna keep my composure. But I mean, I've seen Steele straight up rattle skedoodle out of having a good game based on like a mistake that Ska made in a round or something, and that'll like weigh on Ska for the rest of the map, and he's not as effective anymore. So I feel like
Right.
attitudes and tempers flare on that team way too much, and the comparison I make will be to C9, and I've never seen them yell at each other ever, even when things have gotten really bad. And Sean will be like, "Man, this sucks," or something. He still won't turn to one of his teammates and like light into him. I mean, he might get frustrated, but he won't just lay into him, if you know what I mean. Whereas that happens on iBUYPOWER way too often.
I mean, Cloud9 is just this special case. I've honestly, I've been going to events since 2002, and I have never seen a team with the same uh, in-game communications and personalities like Cloud9, because those guys just like joke.
Hmm.
Like, one of them will die and they'll turn and make a joke to the other one, or one of them will see something funny happen and nothing will like. I mean, nothing's personality is just insane, but
Right.
just like nudge the guy next to him and crack a joke, and everyone will laugh. But you never see that, and it almost like weirded me out at first because I was like, why aren't these guys focused? They're playing very games on Inferno, about to go into overtime, or whatever it might be, and um, it just works for them. So you see there just a great set of personalities that work well together, and then on the other hand, iBUYPOWER, you see, AZK, Ska, like pretty quiet
Yeah.
guys, and then you have Steel and Daze who are, um, you know,
Just straight
known
up laying into
for
people.
yeah, and known for like wanting things to be their way. They're kind of like I guess tyrants might be a little bit too harsh of the word, but they really want things to be. They want Counter Strike played how they want to play it, and if it doesn't, it's going to upset them. And I don't think they go so far as to lay in, but it's more like those small comments that you'll hear him say in between rounds, like "Why did you do this?" or like "Why did you do that?" And it's just kind of like that silent knife in your ribs in the night, and
Yeah.
it's just slowly just chips away at confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that like they always do what I'm illustrating, but I have noticed examples of like Dazed or Steel just like like laying into somebody over like a really minor mistake that lost them around. And while yeah, they're probably right, you probably shouldn't have done that. Probably did cause you to lose the round. It's almost like you just have to kind of look past it and keep focused on the next one. Otherwise, if you just keep harping on one round loss for 3 more rounds, it's just going to affect the negative, like the attitude of the team going forward, and it's just going to cause you to do poorly. And this is not to say that iBUYPOWER can't do well still, even when they do have these attitudes kind of flare up, but it's obviously not helpful. And here's the thing: people have been trying forever in the NA scene to figure out what's wrong with iBUYPOWER, in the sense that why is it that when they go overseas after doing well online and on land domestically, why is it that when they go to overseas they can't do it? They lose out in groups. And Titan kind of had the same issue. They lost out in groups 2 events in a row as well. So it's not like good teams don't lose in groups. They do. But what is it specifically that holds iBUYPOWER back has always been the biggest question. And to be honest, I don't necessarily know the answer, but I'm willing to bet that this particular point that we've brought up certainly doesn't help things. That's what I'm trying to get at.
No, absolutely not. It doesn't. But yeah, I think iBUYPOWER's issues go deeper. We've seen a lot of North American teams have success, and this is why you see I think Europeans beat up on them is um, they beat up on all these lower tier North American teams because of their play style, and it's so slow and predicated on picks, and it's so organized and dictated by their leaders. Um, that when they get up on you in a round, it's really hard to win a round a man down against them. It's very difficult. They're very smart in how they manipulate rotations and how they kind of find creases in the defense to slip into when players have to switch positions. And I think that part of it, I think, is Skadoodle isn't as effective in Europe as he is online. So they like to let him pick areas with an op, and I don't think he gets those picks nearly as much in Europe as he does here in North America. And just in general, they seem to play a little bit more timid. Dazed is a player. What was it? Is that quote that from ESPN, like "Don't play like a pussy," and like they play like a pussy in Europe, and they don't have that aggressiveness that gets them those picks like they do in North America. And you can just see if they're not getting these picks, they let the clock run down to like 25, 30 seconds before actually making a move onto a bomb site. And it's kind of like how Na'Vi plays, and you actually see Na'Vi, who I think plays it better, even struggles with it as well. Na'Vi and iBUYPOWER I think are pretty similar in how they play maps and in their team composition with that dominant opera with Guardian and Skadoodle, but Navi just knows how to make it work a little bit better, and iBUYPOWER just kind of late rounds they seem to fizzle out if they don't have an advantage.
Yeah, and I'll make another point. This is a point that you've made too, so it's not like completely original to me. But I mean, Daze is a really, really good fragger, but it seems like it takes a situation where his team's playing from behind for him to really step up and shine. Like for example, you'll just see him blaze up mid with an AK and get 2 entry frags or something like that. I think the biggest example I remember was when they were losing the Fnatic in an event. They wound up still losing the map, but the point was is like they were getting bashed by Fnatic. Then all of a sudden, Daze just says like, "Man, screw this" or whatever, right? That's not what he actually said, but that's like the attitude that he had, was like, "Man,
Yeah,
screw this," and then he just barges up mid, gets 2 entry picks, boom, boom, and they take the A site and they win around. They still wound up losing the map, but the point was is like, Dazed has these like little sparks where he just comes out flying and he's dangerous, but it's almost like it takes his team being behind before he'll really do that, or it'll take other plans not working out first. Like that plan's like the last resort plan, so to speak. But if he would just do that more often, I feel like getting the entry frags and being that first guy in and lighting people up, I feel like they might be more successful that way. I don't know for sure, but that's just a stab. I don't know.
yeah, no, you're right. I mean, they definitely need someone to step up in some capacity, and I think part of it is, I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not even exactly sure if it's Steel or if it's Days in game leading right now, but I think it's just so structured sometimes. Like the way they open into rounds and they're so spread out and everything is so organized that they can't take advantage of opportunities on the fly. Like perhaps someone notices how a player's playing in mid and he's like, "Oh my god, I can smoke off here and I can, work this smoke and get a pick on the other side or do something." But they play so organized, and Steel and Dazed have such, their leadership styles are so clinching and restrictive that I think that it's kind of hard for someone to take that initiative in a round where you see other teams being able to do it. Like they rely so much on those late game picks that someone's kind of scared to commit into getting entry frags in certain locations if they notice a advantage.
Right. So we've kind of previewed some of the pros and cons of Cloud9 iBUYPOWER now. We've also talked about Netcode Guides, talked about denial. So we've talked about CEVO LAN. We've pretty much talked about all we can really talk about from CEVO LAN at this point without us getting way too long of an episode, because we still have 2 other big topics to talk about. So we're going to move off of CEVO LAN, but we're going to continue to talk about some of these NA teams, talk about the big events coming up. And obviously, the first big event we want to talk about is going to be FACEIT in Milan, which starts Friday the 24th and runs through the 26th. So the VOD of this episode will hopefully release like the day or two before the event starts, which was like my goal, to get this out before it starts so we can kind of preview the event, so to speak. And basically the way the FACEIT is going to work is there's going to be 6 teams there. It's 2 North American teams, which is of course Cloud9 and iBUYPOWER. Essentially there's going to be 2 groups of 3, so there's a group A and a group B. There's 3 teams in each group. Essentially you will play, or we won't. Each team will play each team in the group twice, so that means you're going to get 4 matches basically, and then it's the top 2 teams from each group will advance to a best of 3 semifinals, and then the grand final will be a best of 5. So that's kind of where we're at. So you look at Group A, you have Cloud9, you have LDLC, and you have Virtus Pro. So we've already talked a lot about Cloud9. Based on like how they did at CEVO LAN and stuff, and we've kind of briefly talked about Cologne. But if we really look at Cloud9, just to kind of review what they've done thus far, you look at them taking 2nd place at ESWC LAN, and along the way they beat NIP. That was huge. First time North American team's ever done that. And I know a lot of people will look at that ESWC LAN and say, "Oh, well, Navi was obviously crippled because they didn't have Edward," and obviously Virtus Pro was highly crippled because Snacks came in and didn't really have, like, he came off a plane and immediately started playing, basically jet lag, what have you. And so they will kind of take away a bit of Cloud9's victories against those teams because of those factors, and I can't deny those being huge factors. But no one can take away from their NIP victory. That was huge, and there's no excuse. There's no like handicap that you can put on NIP as a reason for that. That was a big win. And then they 2-0'd Navi. Of course, Navi didn't have Edward, so I guess it has like a little asterisk next to it, which is fair. And then you have them beating VP on cash as well. Of course, they lose to iBUYPOWER 2 different times in the upper bracket finals and grand finals. So typical story of Cloud9, right? Dominate the Europeans, can't beat IVP. And then they placed top 8 at Cologne. They beat Titan and Dignitas in really close games. Of course, I think those wins really had a lot to do with Titan and Dignitas mistakes rather than Cloud9 successes, though they were still good catch plays. And I talked to Sean Gares about Cologne in the last episode of the Hype. So if you want to check out episode 14 to talk about Cologne more, you can get that talk there. And so my point is coming into this event, Cloud9 has had some pretty good international results, with Cologne and ESWC LAN against European teams, and they've never played LDLC before. We're going to talk about LDLC in a minute because, man, LDLC is just really good. But they played against Virtus.pro before, and they beat them before. How do you feel about Cloud9 going into this event, I guess, is the point?
I'm gonna be honest. I feel the same way I feel about them every time they go to an event. Is I feel like their online performances have been underwhelming. I thought they had I'm gonna say a disappointing CEVO because I feel like without winning that CEVO LAN, it's definitely going to be disappointing. They expected to win that, especially after beating iBUYPOWER in the upper bracket. But they always underwhelm a little bit online, and you always just kind of know they're going to show up. And I'm just worried about them against LDLC.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Virtus.pro is another team that could give them issues. So, I mean, once again, it's just like, who's going to come up big for them? Because someone's got to come up with some magical hero play for them. I don't think they're going to beat LDLC. So it goes on to Virtus.pro, where they're going to have to either have someone who just has a monster half, or, like Hiko or Shroud or Semphis is going to have to win like a 1-on-3, 1-on-4 or something. And they have a really, really tough group. So does I. I could actually envision neither North American team making it out of groups at this event.
Yeah, that's definitely a high possibility. What I would say is like another big thing to worry about is Cloud doesn't really have a whole lot of prep going into this at all. I mean, they're not going to get a boot camp. They're not going to get any European practice before they go into FACEIT, which is something that they really got to have before the last major with their boot camp. It wasn't the best boot camp, but it was a boot camp. They've also boot camped at previous majors, and that's helped them out a lot as well, getting into the rhythm, into things. And so that obviously hurts, but at the same time, I mean, ESWC LAN, they have virtually zero prep and still beat NIP and other teams. So, I mean, maybe it isn't that big of a factor, but they're not even getting, like, online scrims against NA teams. Like, I didn't see them hardly scrimming at all over the past few weeks, ever since CEVO LAN was over. So, I mean, I worry that they don't have the prep that they need to be winning this event. I mean, if you want to best LDLC, you need to be on your A game and prepped, and I just don't see that they have it. And we'll talk about. Go ahead. No, before I talk about LDLC, go for it.
Well, no, I'm just gonna say I don't think Cloud9 does anything that complex strategically that they need to be, super versed. And I know, Hiko and Shroud both stream. Semphis plays a lot, and he streams from time to time, and nothing streams. So they're all going to be fine individually, when it comes to like knowing their smokes and knowing their flashbangs. But they're like boxers, dude. They don't do anything that wow as in terms of tactics. They just kind of, they sit back for a little bit, let some smokes fade, watch, try and get some information, and then they just kind of like punch you at a certain location on the map and just hope you fall over. And you don't need a lot of practice to do that. And if they manage to get a boot camp in for like a day or two, I know they all have those Alienware laptops, so they're going to be playing in the hotel rooms and they'll be able to go over some stuff there. But lack of preparation for them, I don't think is going to be a huge issue.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like I said, I've seen them do well at events with less prep than they probably have for this. So, I mean, like I said, I can't really count them out doing well just because of that. So that's one point to make. But let's look at the other teams in this group, right? So LDLC, they look absolutely amazing right now. They look like the #1 team in the world right now, to be quite honest with you. Even before the roster that they have now, I mean, they were already contending. They beat Virtus.pro at Cologne, and they lost to NIP like 2-1 in the semifinals. So they were already like making top 4 finishes even before the roster changes that they made as a team with Happy and stuff like that. And then they pick up, guys like Shocks, like MBK and things like that. And, I mean, they just look so complete right now. And obviously, the big thing they did right after the roster change was make the final of, the Stockholm Invitational. They lost to Titan 2-0 in the grand final, but they still did well against everyone else in the event. to make it there. Then obviously the big thing was just this past weekend, I believe, was of course the Star Series, in which they just 2-0 Navi very convincingly, like really lopsided victories against Navi to get to the next stage where they 2-0 Titan once again, very one-sided fashion. And then they went on to beat Navi 3-2 in the best of 5 in the grand final. Their losses were close on D2 and Overpass, and their wins were huge. I mean, LDLC just looks like a final machine right now, and they haven't really been together all that long in comparison to some of the other teams that are contending internationally, but yet they look just as good, if not better, than most of the field. And I honestly have LDLC as like my favorite to probably win this whole thing, if I'm honest with you. And so I don't think that I honestly can't see LDLC losing a set or losing a map in group play. I think they win all their group matches, and I think that I don't see them losing. I mean, they might lose a map once they get to a best of 3 or best of 5, but I can't see them losing this event based on what I've seen recently.
Okay. That's not bad. I can imagine. I mean, I'm not going to say they're going to go, lossless in groups. I could see them definitely losing maps to Virtus Pro. I don't know if Cloud9 is going to have what it takes, but Cloud9 has always surprised me in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not ready to give them a higher estimation than Fnatic. I think Fnatic has proven a lot that they've been amazing, and LDLC is kind of that hot team right now. They're like the team that, it's the cool thing to pick LDLC at this moment. So I think that.
Hey, they had the results that back it up. All right.
Yeah, but they have it over like a very. I mean, and who else was at LCLTV aside from Titan and Epsilon and Navi? I don't even know if there was anyone outside of those 3 teams.
I mean, they played Navi, they played Titan, and those are 2 pretty big teams. So I mean, yeah, obviously there wasn't the field there, but
Yeah, I mean, listen, LDLC has looked better since their inception every single time I've seen them play, and they are probably the scariest team right now. But I'm not going to. I mean, Fnatic's equally frightening to me, and Fnatic is equally
yeah,
as good. I think they've been playing so well for so much longer that I can't just give LDLC a favorite to win the entire event. Although they're definitely my favorite to get to the final. I think it's going to be LDLC and Fnatic in the finals for sure.
yeah, that's where I'm at. Um,
I mean, I think that's pretty safe too. I think a lot of people are going to think it's going to be LDLC and Fnatic, but Dignitas is a scary team, and you know what? I mean, this is a cool event because all these European teams I think are could easily make the finals, and then I think Cloud9, if they somehow pull out their North American magic and do it, then good for them. But Virtus Pro won that major, and they look so good at times, and they just look like they slump it during stretches. And if they get their stuff together, then
yeah,
they
I
can
think
right.
I think my issue it's really hard to predict Virtus Pro going into this event simply because we really haven't seen them play a LAN since Cologne. Um, I can't recall an event that they've been to since Cologne as far as LANs go. I know they've done a lot of online play. Everyone's doing a lot. There's so much online stuff going on right now between like the FACEIT and the FACEIT Masters and the God, what are the other ones are? It's like this Legend series,
In a hitbox.
Hitbox Arena.
Yeah, they've got a
There's
lot of
just
stuff going on over
so
there.
much going on that it's even hard to kind of keep up with online results at this point. But I mean, I know Virtus Pro is supposed to be playing Dignitas today. I don't know if they'd ever finish the best of 3 to determine like who makes it to Fragbite Masters LAN. So I know that they're like riding on that. They recently beat Hellraisers and Fragbite Masters to get to that point where they're playing Dignitas. Last time we saw them was at Cologne where they got eliminated by LDLC in the in like the quarterfinals. So based on limited LAN results to look at from Virtus Pro, and the last time they did play against LDLC was, in my opinion, when LDLC was a weaker team and they still lost to them. I think LDLC has done nothing but get better in the changes that they had made, and I think they're a better team now than when they faced Virtus Pro the last time by a pretty
Right.
good margin. And so, with that being said, if I just use history, which I use a lot, even though it's not necessarily the best course to take, um, I really do think when you look at Group A, which is Cloud9, LDLC, and VP, I think LDLC absolutely comes out of this group as the #1 seed. They might, like you said, maybe they do drop him after Virtus Pro out of the two that they play against Virtus Pro on. But I don't think, I think they still take #1 in the group. I don't think there's any question about that to me. And I think as far as who comes out of the group second, it honestly just depends. I mean, the only head-to-head results I've ever seen between the guys on Cloud9 and the guys on Virtus Pro is the last ESCA LAN where Cloud9 2-1'd them and won in the lower bracket.
I honestly feel like you have to throw that out because Jordan went what, like 90 something and 70 or 80.
Nothing
like,
went absolutely bonkers in that.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't throw it out, but my point is you can't like let that be the way you decide things, because if that's the way we decided things, then iBUYPOWER should have beat Virtus Pro in groups of Cologne, right? If like that former head-to-head result held any weight. And I think it's like a similar thing here. You can't let that hold all the weight in the world to make a prediction.
That's fair.
So here's what I'll say.
I
There's
think
a
LDLC
better
and Virtus Pro are making it out. I don't think Cloud9's going to make it out.
Yeah, but I think that Cloud9 has a way better chance of making it out of groups than iBUYPOWER does based on the group draw. I think it's more reasonable to believe that Cloud9 is able to like best Virtus Pro to get a second seed out of Group A than it is for me to think that iBUYPOWER is going to be able to find a way to beat Fnatic and Dignitas to get out of Group B. That's where I'm at.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I could get along with that.
So what is your final Group A predictions before we move on to previewing Group
LDLC
B?
and Virtus Pro.
Okay, that's pretty much where I'm at, but I wouldn't be surprised if Cloud9 bested VP to get out of that. Is my point.
No, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I honestly don't think it's going to happen. But like I said, Cloud9 always surprises me, and like don't take this as I don't like Cloud9. I think they're a very good team, and I root for them at every event. But I just feel so unconfident sometimes with how they require those magical plays, and I'm not sure. I
think it really boils down to map. Like I think LDLC gets #1 seed out of this group no matter what maps are, in my opinion.
No, I'm not even saying a specific map. I just don't think that Virtus Pro is gonna. I don't think Virtus Pro is gonna lose to Cloud9. I don't think either of those teams is gonna lose to Cloud9 enough to let them slip in as a second seed.
Right. The point I was just trying to add was basically that no matter what the maps are, I think LDLC takes map 1. But I think that depending on maps, Cloud9 does have a better chance of maybe getting Virtus Pro depending on what kind of maps they get. Like obviously if they like play on a Mirage or something like that, I don't think Cloud9 has that great of a chance, but you know, if they play them on a D2 or an Inferno or something that Cloud9's comfortable on, that they perform well on, then maybe there is a chance that they get past VP. But the only safe bet I have is that LDLC makes it 1, and I honestly think it's a toss-up for me who takes 2 out of Group A. But
oh, you can't do that. You got to make a prediction.
I said VP, I did, but okay, I'm just saying that like, to me, it's not like Virtus Pro is this heavy favorite. Like they're like 80-20 in odds or something crazy like that. I think it's like 60-40 for me, VP. You know, that's where I'm at.
Okay.
So let's look at Group B then. Group B is Fnatic, Dignitas, and iBUYPOWER. We look at Fnatic. Obviously, the big thing for them is you know, they won the original major and DreamHack winner, but everyone didn't think that they would ever be able to repeat that performance again. They thought it was kind of a fluke, and, well, it kind of turned out to be until they made some roster changes, to be honest with you. But they did, and ever since they did pick up Olaf Meister and Krems and move Devil Walk to a coaching role and some of these different things, I mean, they've done well. You look at Cologne, they took second place. They beat iBUYPOWER and VP in groups to get the 1 seed out of the group. They then 2-1 Navi to get to the semifinals, and then when they got to the semifinals, they 2-1 Dignitas, and then they moved on and lost to NIP 2-1. Now, I will say this. I think that if Navi didn't have to play Nuke against Fnatic, there might have been a good chance that you saw Fnatic top 8 this event and never even make it the way that they did, but that's a minor factor. They still wound up beating Dignitas in the semis, which Dignitas is the king of making semifinals, not advancing past that. And so that was a great event for Fnatic. You look at the Stockholm Invitational, they had good wins against Dignitas and Titan to get out. Wait.
I mean, you know, we don't have to worry about these results so much because we know what our top 2 teams are going to be. Like, Group B is pretty blatant which teams are making it out where. Let's just talk about Fnatic versus Dignitas.
Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to give you a little bit of a preview. I mean, if you
Right,
look,
right.
just to try to give
Gotcha.
you, trying to give the viewers some information about their most recent results. Um, and also, Fnatic has just had great online results lately. Like they're beating everyone in FACEIT right now. And then in Fragmite Masters, they recently beat Titan. So I mean, they're just doing really well. Like Fnatic's looking really sharp. You know, I know LDLC was kind of like a team that you mentioned and I have said that looks like maybe the most dangerous team in the world right now, but Fnatic is not too far behind based on how their online results have been lately and based on how they did at the last major. And while they fell shorter than what they probably should have at DreamHack Stockholm, I think they maybe should have made it to the final, instead of losing a Titan like they did. But either way, they're still a really strong team. When you look at Dignitas, like I said, these guys are the kings of the semifinal, right? I mean, they make it to the semifinals at a lot of the majors. Um, they lost to Fnatic recently. I think the big thing with Dignitas is that the last LAN we saw them at was shaky, right? I mean, they lost to Fnatic, which isn't necessarily like super surprising, but the fact that they let 3D Max eliminate them in groups, that was a tough pill to swallow if you're Dignitas, I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely.
Especially since that's the last LAN they've been to.
But I'm not. I don't put too much stock in that, to be honest with you. That was just a best of one. It went into overtime.
Right.
That kind of stuff happens. I'm not gonna make that a big black mark against Dignitas by any means.
But I think that let's get to Dignitas versus Fnatic. That's what you said we should do. And I think based on the fact that we've seen Dignitas drop to Fnatic at DreamHack Stockholm, lose to Fnatic in the semis of Cologne 2-0. Head to head, it seems like Fnatic has the edge over Dignitas, and I would then pick Fnatic to be number one seed in the group and Dignitas number two.
Yeah, I mean, I think Group B is going to be number one Fnatic, two Dignitas, and I think going into it, I have Fnatic and LDLC in the finals. But Virtus Pro and Dignitas are both like two teams who we've seen have a lot of success in the past, and if they hit
Mm-hmm.
their peak form, they can easily make an upset, and they can
Oh yeah.
easily change how those finals are going to play out. But Fnatic and LDLC are definitely the two favorites, and I'm not even sure I'm going to give iBUYPOWER a chance of making it out of groups. To be honest with you, not even a little bit.
There's no reason to. I mean, if history repeats itself, there's no way. I mean, iBUYPOWER lost to Fnatic at the previous major in Cologne. Of course, it was Cobblestone. They didn't play Cobblestone. Whatever. I'm not even going to try to get into that argument. Um, then it's just too sticky. And I think they've lost to Fnatic at a previous major as well. I can't remember if it was Katowice or like DreamHack Winter, but Fnatic was the team that bested them even before their roster changes. Where now they're even a better team, to be honest, than they were before. Uh,
Okay.
so so iBUYPOWER versus Fnatic head to head. I mean, the history definitely favors Fnatic, obviously. Um, the only thing I can say, they're at Gfinity, which, by the way, Gfinity is so far the only event iBUYPOWER has been to overseas where they actually did something. In the sense that they were able to tie Fnatic, they were able to beat NIP, but they still wound up losing immediately once they got to bracket play whenever they got 2-0'd by Titan in the opening best of three. Um, outside of that, the only time they've ever played against Dignitas, to my knowledge, was group play at Katowice, where they lost on Nuke pretty heavily. They did lose to Fnatic at Katowice as well, so I was right about that. So they've never beaten Fnatic and they've never beaten Dignitas. Granted, they've only played Dignitas once, but yeah, I mean, based on, here's my point. What I'll make is I don't think iBUYPOWER's really done that much between this event and Cologne to have really made themselves have a better chance of succeeding against a team like a Fnatic or Dignitas. I don't see where they've drastically improved to be able to do better against those teams.
Yeah, no, not at all. I don't think. I mean, I don't think you can even place. Even if they were practicing, it's just they took a lot of time off. Even Steel said, "I can't believe we won CEVO after like not playing
Yeah.
for like a couple weeks or whatever." But even so, even if they'd been boot camping for this entire month or practicing and going through this strict regimen of Counter Strike, there's no reason to put any confidence in their ability to beat European teams.
Literally, the only way that I can see iBUYPOWER coming out of this group and actually besting the likes of a Fnatic or a Dignitas is in the ultra rare situation where literally all five of your players are hitting their peak, which hardly ever happens. Typically, somebody is having an off game or not playing quite perfect, or in
Yeah,
general, someone's is occasionally missing a shot they don't normally miss, or just whatever. Like, I mean, yeah, if everyone hit their peak on iBUYPOWER, they have a lot of individually talented players on that team that can come up big and can frag against the best in the world. But um, it's unreasonable to suspect that they would be able to hold that throughout 4 maps of group play where everyone's just on point 100% of the time or something like that.
Right, and maybe their only chance of this event might be trying to take advantage of Dignitas's weak terrorist sides, being known as like having these badass CT sides, and they've improved a little bit lately, but still kind of see them struggle a little bit on their offensive halves. And if iBUYPOWER just can just build a massive lead and just
Yeah.
find some way to just squeak out a couple rounds on their offensive half against that
Hmm.
freaking Danish
Yeah.
defense.
It's going to come down to this: if iBUYPOWER can get an early lead, if they can win pistols and avoid getting ecoed, if they can keep their momentum going, if they can keep their attitudes in check and not get tilted when they get behind, if Skadoodle can finally have a huge event with the op overseas outside of Gfinity, then yeah, if all those factors line up and the stars align in the sky, and I mean, then yeah, maybe they do. But I just don't see it. I haven't seen it out of them yet, and I have no reason to expect them to do well until they prove that they can. That's
Yep,
where I'm at.
yep,
I
that's
hate
fair.
to say that. Obviously, like, I'm an NA Counter Strike fan, and obviously I am like deep in my heart rooting for Cloud9 and iBUYPOWER to do well at this event in advance and all these things. But realistically, as a commentator, I have to step back and say, what has iBUYPOWER really ever done overseas to make me believe that they will
No,
advance over Fnatic or Dignitas? And there isn't anything to
they've
grab
done nothing.
onto.
They've done nothing.
So please prove me wrong, but I just don't see it yet. And that's where I'm at with Fragment Master. So at that point, let's just say that we agree that VP and LDLC are your Group A people, Group B, Fnatic, and Dignitas. So let's say it's Fnatic versus Virtus Pro, and then uh, Dignitas versus LDLC. So at that point, I'll give my prediction, you'll give yours. So at that point, I would pick a Fnatic over Virtus Pro, and I would pick an LDLC over Dignitas. And then in the finals, it's LDLC Fnatic, and I pick LDLC. That's where I'm at.
Okay. I mean, I'm gonna take finals of BLDLC and Fnatic as well, but I'm gonna take Fnatic.
Okay. Any reasoning behind that?
No, and actually, it's weird because I want to pick LDLC. I really do, but I just think I just think Fnatic has just been so good for so long. I guess maybe you want me to give you a reason. It's just I think their players are just, JW is just amazing, and I think that part of the reason why we're seeing LDLC play so well at this moment is they're in this little like honeymoon period with each other,
Mm.
where they're just all like super motivated and super positive and super happy. And not to say that's ever going to end, which would be great if they were just like if this was just their how they're going to play consistently. But um, I think you look at the success that NBK has had and
Mm-hmm.
Smiths, and I think you look back as well, and I think that might taper off a little bit at some point.
I don't
Uh,
know. I think MBK has finally come back around. I mean, he was obviously a big name for Very Games and Counter Strike Source, one of their star players. I think he was kind of a star player for Very Games early on in CS:GO, but then obviously people like Kenny S and stuff come in kind of overshadow him, and he's kind of like now the second or third star on the team or what have you. And I think that ever since he has made it over to LDLC, it almost seems like he's just in a more comfortable situation. Maybe chemistry's better. I don't know. But obviously, we always expect Shox to perform really well. We know that Kirishima
yeah,
has great potential as a younger guy to rise up to be a superstar maybe in the French scene, as he already is kind of showing. And then MBK's individual play has, I won't want to say skyrocketed. It's not like he didn't do well individually with Titan in various games. I mean, he
oh,
had events
he
where he
didn't do
did.
well individually towards the end of
Yeah,
Titans.
that's my
He
point. It's
was
like,
playing poorly.
yeah, so early, that's what the point I was trying to make is that he did have some really good events with Various Games and Titan earlier on in CSGO, but like you said, towards the tail end of Titan, he started to
Yeah.
taper off. But I think that that's because he was in a bad way, a bad situation. Uh, and I think that now he's in a way more comfortable situation. And I think that MBK is going to continue to play at the level we saw him at the last LAN, which was, Star Series. I think you can expect Shox and MBK and Kyoshima to be kind of the three heavy fraggers on that team pretty consistently.
Yeah, I just think Fnatic I think is tactically a lot better, and I think that a lot of the things that LDLC um, does, I think is going. I think Fnatic's going to be able to put a stop to it if they're if they like watch some demos and study them a little bit beforehand, I think they'll find a
Yeah.
lot of opportunities to get picks.
I mean, unfortunately, the only head-to-head results we have between these guys are from online, in which LDLC beat Fnatic and Hitbox Arena in a best-of-3. Though the matches were pretty close, with the exception of like Inferno, LDLC won pretty one-sided. Then prior to that, Fnatic's beaten them in FACEIT a couple of times, so they've basically traded online results with one another. So, and they don't really have any LANs head-to-head against each other since the roster changes with LDLC. So there isn't a whole lot of information to go off of, other than, like you said, Fnatic could be better tactically, but I mean, you could argue that the depth is pretty similar. I mean, you got MBK Kirishima and Shocks, and then you have, when you look over at Fnatic, you got, people like JW, people like Flusha, people like Olaf Meister, and even Krems, who has individually played better with this team as in compared to maybe LGB. So yeah, I mean, it's tough for me, but I don't know. I'm just taking LDLC on a gut feeling more than anything.
That's fair. I mean, like I said, I want to pick LDLC. I think they're playing really well and they're kind of on fire. So um, I would love to be able to pick them, but I just think Fnatic's the better team, and I think they'll take it in the end.
All right, so leave it at that, and we'll then move on to our final topic for tonight before we answer a couple of viewer questions that I had from the ESCA forums and from the Reddit. Just a couple of quick points to kind of hammer away at before we turn the show off, because it's already lasted like an hour and a half, so it's been a pretty long show. Maybe even a little bit longer than an hour and a half already, but we're keeping chugging along. And the last thing we're going to talk about is going to be ESWC. And this is going to be, we're just going to rapid fire this because groups aren't even fully determined yet, so it's kind of hard to super predict it. We can try to, do guesswork as far as what we think will happen, and we'll just kind of go from there. So you look at Group A. Apparently, from what I understand, how this is supposed to work is just a basic round robin within your group. There's 6 teams per group, so you're playing 5 matches, and the best 2 teams advance into a top 8 situation, and it's a single elimination bracket, best of 3 after that. That's what I've been told. First of all, I don't know how in the world iBUYPOWER got high seed and Cloud9 got medium seed for this event to begin with, but whatever. So groups are groups.
It's because iBUYPOWER
actually won a qualifier to get there, and Cloud9 got invited. Okay, yeah. I was wondering if that was maybe the case, and I guess that makes sense. Whatever. So here's the deal. I think groups are pretty easy to predict except for Group C. So Group A is Fnatic, Na'Vi, Kick, London Conspiracy, POW, and Energy Esports. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know anything about Power Energy Esports at all. I have no earthly idea. No clue. Just nothing. Got nothing off for you. Yeah. I have seen London Conspiracy do some decent stuff online. But as far as like the LAN environment goes, they've done some okay things, but they didn't necessarily perform like at a major, to be honest. I know they were at the last major, and they didn't make it out of groups, right? Yeah, they didn't make it out of groups at the last major. You have Kick, which honestly I'm not even sure if their roster is the same as it was back in the day when they were sometimes surprising people with online results. I don't think it's really the same team anymore. So with that being said, pretty clear cut for me that it's going to be Fnatic and Na'Vi advancing out of this group, and I would probably give Fnatic the slight edge over Na'Vi for the 1 seed.
Yep, I agree. Fnatic, Na'Vi.
Gotcha. Group B, we have Virtus.pro, the ESWC France runner-up, because they're doing their qualifiers on site right before the major tournament.
Right.
So essentially, that would mean that the runner-up would either be
LDLC or Titan.
LDLC Titan, or I guess
Epsilon.
I guess. So once I don't know who the runner-up would be. I mean, so far Titan and LDLC have traded each other head-to-head between Stockholm Invitational and Star Series, so I don't really know who would win between those two at the event. So I don't know if it would be LDLC or Titan in the group. If it's LDLC in the group, I think it's Virtus.pro LDLC who advance out of this group. If it's...
Well, yeah, it's basically... It might just be a repeat of the group from FACEIT, which is kind of funny.
Could be, in which case it would really determine how FACEIT goes, determine how ESWC goes.
So if that's Titan or Epsilon, I'm going to take Cloud9 over either of those teams. I'd pick Cloud9 and Virtus.pro. But if it's LDLC, I'll pick. I mean, it might change after FACEIT this weekend, but I'd pick Virtus.pro and LDLC over Cloud9.
Yeah, I think if it's Titan, I think Cloud9 finds a way to win that. They've had a good history against like the Titan lineup. I know the Titan lineup's different. I would argue it's really not that much better than what they had before. I mean, yeah, Kenny S is rising to the occasion as an opper, but I mean, Cloud9, honestly, tactically, has had pretty good luck shutting down Oppers, like, the way that they play. So,
Yeah,
I mean, I would kind of,
I just think they've always done well against existence-led teams.
yeah.
They've always beat them even when they're not supposed to, and
Mhm.
um, so I mean I'm gonna regardless of how good Kenny S is because I actually think he's one of the best players in the world, performing
Yeah.
that way right now.
Hmm.
Um, I think Cloud9 finds a way to win that game. They always
Hmm.
have.
Yeah, so I think there's a good chance that Cloud9 actually does make it out of groups in ESWC as compared to FACEIT. I don't know, man. Like, when it comes to Cloud9 versus VP, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean we already talked. It's
Well,
a toss-up.
it's a
It's you
toss
said it
up,
was
and
60-40.
obviously, I think whoever wins Face It will win here too. So let's say Cloud9 does advance over Virtus Pro and Face It, then I would predict them to advance over Virtus Pro. And just because the two tournaments are so close together, there's not really a whole lot of time in between to make adjustments or to practice things or to change things up a whole lot.
Well, here's
Um,
what's funny. I'm going to go the other way. I think if Cloud9 makes it out at FACEIT, then Virtus is going to make it out here at ESWC. And I think if Virtus makes it out at FACEIT, I think Cloud9 will make it out at ESWC. I think it's always harder in such a short period of time for the winning team to win twice. Always.
Right, because is it like a philosophy where you think the loser team has a better chance of making adjustments on fixing their mistakes on why they lost, and thus they will win next time, whereas the winning team doesn't know how to change things up to keep the losing team guessing? Or
Uh, I think it's just hard to beat the same team twice just because, you know, you notice individual. I don't think on a team scale it's as noticeable necessarily, but I think the losing team um, figures out a lot better than the winning team how like the losing team has more motivation to change small things. You might know the strats they like to run, but the losing team has more of a reason to like tweak a couple things minorly, and I think that always kind of throws off the winning team a little bit more than the losing team will be affected.
I'm gonna go full freedom mode and say Cloud9 just advances out of Group B no matter what. That's me.
Okay,
Just full freedom mode. And
America.
America, yeah. I mean, no, seriously though, I think that if Titan is the team that winds up going in Group B against Cloud9 and Virtus Pro, I think Cloud9 definitely advances regardless of how their matchup against Virtus Pro goes. However, I think that if it is LDLC who somehow becomes the runner-up in Group B, and then it's between like Virtus Pro, LDLC, and Cloud9, I think it absolutely depends on how Cloud9 does against Virtus Pro, whether or not they make it out the group. And I think at that point it's a toss-up. So I think it really does boil down to who is the French team in their group with them to determine what their chances are that they make it out. Like I said, I think having Titan would be better than having LDLC. But either way, I think that they can make it out of this. The other teams in the group were Planet Key Dynamics, Virtual Impact, and Alien Tech. And I have no idea who any of those teams are except for Planet Key Dynamics. And wasn't one of Planet Key Dynamics players like VAC banned for cheating or something like that?
Was that team? Might have
I
been.
have no idea. I thought it was.
I'm
I
not
have,
sure which team it was, to be honest with you.
yeah, because I know there was like this controversy going on about like the DreamHack Winter qualifiers and players being VAC banned, not being able to participate, and
Yep.
la da 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 da. And I'm not 100% sure how that pans out then with that. I don't know. Maybe it was a different German team that got caught. I don't know with a player that did that, but I'm not 100% sure. Either way, I don't think it matters. I think it'll be. We already made our predictions for Group B. We're done there. So, next up, Group C. ESWC France winner, NIP, Hellraisers, Copenhagen Wolves, Kaboom, and E4Us. So, this to me is actually the hardest group to predict, in my opinion, on who will advance. And the reason for it is because I think whoever the ESW France winner is will advance out of the group. Not sure if it'll be 1 seed or 2 seed. If I had to predict, I think it'll be LDLC who makes it in the Group C as the winner, and they will make it out of Group C if there's a 1 or 2 seed. But then it comes down to NIP or Hellraisers on who's going to get the other seed, on who's going to get out. And I can't confidently say it's NIP anymore based on recent match results. Especially since NIP does have a history of struggling against CIS teams like Hellraisers. NIP's recent match results, though they did... I mean, here's the thing. Everyone's like, whoa, they won Cologne, so why are you so judgmental against NIP? But the bottom line is they look pretty fragile even before they won Cologne. No one expected them to win Cologne. It was kind of a miracle that they did, to be honest. based on the struggles that they had going up into the event. And then when you look at everything that's happened after that, I mean, they missed out qualifying for the FACEIT LAN just completely. They had terrible FACEIT online results against teams like LDLC and Hellraisers and Fnatic and Dignitas. I mean, everyone was beating up on NIP and FACEIT. And then you look at Fragbite Masters, and I mean, it wasn't a much better story for them there either in online play. And then they didn't make it to the Star Series finals either after losing to LDLC and Titan. So it's like they're not really beating anyone anymore. Like, the thing is way back in the day, right, no one was taking maps off of NIP. They had like 80-something maps won in a row or some crazy thing like that. And now it's almost like it's almost become to a point where they're losing more than they're winning in online play, which is something that I never thought I would see, but they just seem to be on a downward spiral. I don't know what's going to save them, but my point is because of that, I can't confidently say that they'll make it out of groups in the ESWC.
I'm actually, yeah, I'm gonna pick NIP, but I agree with you. You can't really confidently say that they're gonna make it out, but it almost made it more impressive at Cologne that they managed to win, looking so. It's like they were struggling so much. Like it was just amazing to me that they won, and that's what you see out of these great teams is like finding ways to win when they're not supposed to, and NIP knows how to do that. And honest to God, Hellraisers has never impressed me, and I've even when they announced that lineup and it got all that hype, I never thought they would be anything special, and they haven't done anything to prove otherwise. So.
Mm-hmm.
That pickup of Simple is looking really good. He's dominating for him, and he seems to be like exactly what they've needed. But I don't think that NIP is going to lose to them here. But I do think that whether it be Titan or LDLC to come out as the France winner, that team's going to be 1 and NIP is going to be 2.
Yeah, I could see that. And I think that's like the counterpoint that you made to my point is the best one that you can make, which is, yeah, LDLC, I mean, NIP has looked shaky, but, God, I keep I don't know what's going on. NIP has obviously looked shaky, but they still find a way to win. And so that's like being able to play in adversity and find a way to win. But regardless, as I feel like eventually, as poorly as they've been doing recently in comparison to how great they used to be, it almost feels like they're not going to be able to consistently keep slipping by and finding ways to win in adversity. Like, eventually the miracle's not going to happen and they're going to lose. And I think it's already kind of happened in some of these online qualifiers for like FACEIT and Fragbite Masters. So yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think NIP is still more consistent than Hellraisers, but Hellraisers is a team that in a best of 1 in group play, based on NIP's track record sometimes against this particular team or CIS teams in general, I can't really I could really definitely see a world where it's like LDLC and Hellraisers advancing out of Group C and NIP getting left behind.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can definitely see it. It wouldn't necessarily surprise me.
Mm-hmm. But just for the sake, I'll take NIP out of here with LDLC.
I mean, it's kind of interesting. I'm looking at these groups, and I don't really see like a group that I would consider the group of death. But I think
Group C is the closest to me.
Yeah, because I think CPH Wolves is
it
not
still
a,
has
not
a chance to
team.
challenge. Yeah.
And
exactly.
I think they could beat Hellraisers and NIP. And
this is the only group where I can like name 4 teams that have a chance to advance, whereas every other group it's either like a clear 2 or there's 3.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think this is the only group where there's like more than 3 teams that have a chance of advancing. So this is the toughest group to me because of that.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
So then the final group, Group D, Dignitas, iBUYPOWER, 3D Max, Mouse Sports, G Play, and the Japanese team, I don't even know how to say it, Sapangu Go? I don't know. I just guessed. I have no idea. I'm bad. Don't know anything about those last 2 teams I named, so all I can really go off of is what I know about Dignitas, iBUYPOWER, 3D Max, and Mouse Sports. Of the 2 events that iBUYPOWER will attend in the next couple of weeks between FACEIT and the ESWC, they have a much better chance of advancing out of the ESWC group than they do at FACEIT, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, I definitely think that Dignitas probably takes number 1 seed out of this group, no problem. But I think it's realistic to believe that iBUYPOWER, because iBUYPOWER has a way better chance of besting 3D Max and Mouse Sports to make it out of Group D of ESWC than they do of dodging both Fnatic and Dignitas to get out of Group B of FACEIT. So I think if iBUYPOWER is going to make something happen in Europe, here in the next few weeks, it's going to be ESWC rather than FACEIT. And with that said, I picked Dignitas as my 1 seed, and to me, it's a toss-up. I actually, you know what? No, I will confidently say that iBUYPOWER makes it out of Group D. I'm doing it. I'm not going to get on the fence on this one. Full freedom mode, Dignitas 1, iBUYPOWER 2 out of Group D of ESWC. And this is the funny story then, is it's funny because I think that, like, in FACEIT, we all think that Cloud9 has a much better chance of making it to bracket play than iBUYPOWER does. But at ESWC, iBUYPOWER has a better chance than Cloud9 does. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I'm going to say it's Dignitas and iBUYPOWER making it out of that group, but I mean, I'm just going to say this because I actually caught a lot of flack. I posted on ESCA forums when these groups got released, and I was like, I don't think iBUYPOWER could have asked for a better group to make it out with, and I had a couple people actually think I was insane for it. But yeah, 3D Max played really well over Dignitas and beat Dignitas, but like I mean that was a best of 1. Like I said, I'm not going to give him too much